And the longest held inmate at the Nueces County Jail was back in court today, only to find out he'll be spending an additional 45 days in jail before his murder trial can even begin. Joseph Tejeda has spent the last 1,700 days in jail awaiting to be tried for capital murder. The 29-year-old is suspected of murdering 21-year-old Breanna Wood, mutilating her body, and then leaving her remains in a box wrapped in plastic. That box later found in an abandoned building near Robstown in January 4 years ago. Today, 105th District Court Judge Jack Plutcher told defense attorneys their request for a jury pool of 1,000 prospective jurors cannot be accommodated due to COVID restrictions. The judge has ordered another status hearing in 45 days with hopes of being able to accommodate that requested 1,000-person jury pool. Last summer, prosecutors said they dropped the death penalty after discussing the case with Woods' mother. Trial, when it does happen, is expected to last 4 to 6 weeks.